Today I'm going to show you how I use exhaust temperature to help me roast coffee at home. Stick around. Alright, thanks for joining me today and welcome to the Virtual Coffee Lab. We're just about to charge the roaster with a pound of Central American coffee. Today I want the focus to be on the exhaust temperature. I'm roasting this coffee for our family, and I don't want to focus strictly on the best roast. I want to really pay attention to the exhaust temperature and talk about that, because over the past couple of years I've been paying more and more attention to roasting with exhaust temperature. And as a matter of fact, one of my most recent roasts that I did, I used the exhaust temperature to just about completely control my entire roast. Manually, of course, but following along and paying attention to my exhaust temperature. So I'm going to kind of do that today, and I want to talk about that. This is kind of a newer experience for me. I don't know everything about exhaust temperatures. So if you have experiences to share, if you've got information that can help me learn more about how exhaust temperatures influence a roast, please share those in the comments. Also, while you guys watch this video, if you find that it's helpful for you, be sure to hit that like button. That really helps me out with the videos and getting that out into the community of people like you that roast coffee at home. The roaster is fully warmed up, and I want a charge temperature of about 385 degrees. I'm going to have Artisan going, and we're going to talk about the graph while it's roasting, as well as how I'm paying attention and adjusting my fuel along the way. Okay, a little bit of a misstep there. Went a little bit past my charge temperature, so I let it come down just a hair. But we're going to be watching the exhaust temperature and the red line here. Specifically, when it gets to 375, I'm going to turn my gas on. The reason why I'm doing that is because I don't want my exhaust temperature to get much below 375 degrees. I'm doing that because if I get it much below 375 degrees, it's going to take me longer to build that energy back up to where I want this temperature to plateau, which is about 410 degrees. So that's going to be the idea today, is to be able to get this red line to be able to climb and get up to 410 degrees. So I've made two gas adjustments because I didn't just want to fly through this roast. The first gas adjustment that I made was I turned the gas on when I hit 375, and I set my gas at around 30–40% of its total capability. And I did that to be able to start to move the exhaust temperature up, but not so fast. I basically kept it so the exhaust temperature wouldn't continue to fall. So looking at the graph, you'll see where it kind of bent to the right, and then I made another gas adjustment, and it is now climbing, and we are going to see how we've progressed on the roast here. So 269, 270 degrees at 1 minute and 30 seconds. That puts me in the ballpark of where I want to be as far as time goes for my dry phase, which is going to be between 4.5 and 5 minutes. Now, I've got my gas at 1 kPa right now, and that is about 80% power for my roast, and you'll notice that the exhaust temperature is climbing. The goal for me here, as I mentioned, is to get up to 410 and then start to back my gas off to plateau at that level. So right now we are, 385 degrees, 390 degrees on the exhaust temperature, and about 15–20 more degrees and we'll be good. My rate of rise is about 20. I'm not going to have a lot more rate of rise. It's going to go maybe to 24. That's pretty much where my roaster kind of starts to peter out, unless I've really hopped it up with a lot of my charge temperature being a lot higher, and my pre-warming temperature being a lot higher as well. All right, so you can see here our dry phase prediction is 4 minutes and 50 seconds, and that's exactly where I was hoping that we would be. We're still climbing towards that 400 degree mark on our exhaust temperature, where that wants to be, and I'm starting to smell a little bit of the grassiness that occurs when heat is being applied to coffee beans from green. That is going to turn into more of a hay-like, and if we take a look here at the beans, we should start to see a little bit of paling going on. Definitely a brighter green, and we are approaching 395, almost 400 degrees on our exhaust temperature. So things are going according to plan. I'm going to start to back off my gas to kind of level off the exhaust temperature, regardless of where I'm at with my dry phase. That's kind of a big statement, and it's been kind of a hard one for me, because you can see right here that my rate of rise is now declining, and I haven't changed my gas. But that'll bounce back up and start to go back up. All right, so I'm going to start to back my gas off, and I'm moving it now to about 6.5 kPa. I'm not going to back it all the way down. I'm going to let it start to slope a little bit. And I'm going to check my greens, and we're almost at yellow. Almost. Tiny bit more green, and there we go, yellow. Mark it dry. And now we are on our descent. I'm going to make one more adjustment downward on my gas. Now take a look at my exhaust temperature. You can see where it started to plateau, but it's still climbing a little. All right, well, here's one of the things that I really pay attention to while I'm roasting with the exhaust temperature, and it's the long dashed red arm. That is going to be my clue as to the behavior of what this roaster, what the temperatures are doing. We're leveling off here. What I want to do is I want to maintain that level of energy, and so I want to have that bar stay relatively flat when I can. And it's going to take a little bit of finagling to do that. It's going to take just a little bit of finagling to bring that, to keep it level. And notice I'm not really talking about my rate of rise much right now. I know it's going to be kind of wonky, but that's okay. Making another adjustment here. Now, normally when I have a descent, like you'll see my rate of rise is descenting. Normally my gas is about 1 dash below the 5. So I know that I'm kind of within my normal roasting range, and you can see that my exhaust temperature is fairly flat here. And that's one of the things that I want to do, is I want to maintain that flat line. But the reality is, as I get closer to first crack and after first crack, I'm going to start to have a slightly downward trend. And so here are some of my points that I want to talk to you about as far as exhaust temperatures go. The first reason why I think exhaust temperatures are important and really helpful to us is that they tell us how much energy we've got packed into our roaster, that we've got available to roast coffee. If I started with my exhaust temperature and my bean temperature at the same temperature at charge, I would still be trying to climb and catch up on my rate of rise, on my overall roast. We're getting the first crack. I'm going to back my gas off just a shade here. We're not quite there. We had some outliers. Let me take a look here. All right. And and still some outliers. We're going to back our gas off some more. Turn up our air just a tad. So exhaust temperature, here's first crack. No, not quite. Yep, there's first crack. So exhaust temperature is going to tell us about our available energy. It's also going to tell us about which direction our energy momentum is going. So you can see we're slightly climbing here. I'll turn up the gas or air a little bit more. We're still climbing a little bit, and so I've got plenty of energy to momentum to get through my roast. All right, so now I'm trying to slow my roast down. You'll see my exhaust temperature come down a little bit. All right, yeah, my first crack did not mark my first crack. I'll have to look on my time on my roast. I'm going to say it was about 8 minutes. So roast, properties, events, first crack was 8 minutes. All right, so now I'm going to see my development time, and I'm getting close here. Now, I messed this up just a little bit, like I always do when I do a video, and that's okay. But take a look at the distance between the red line and the bean temperature. All right, we're getting ready to drop. Turning on the fan, a little sniff. And we are going to drop. So let's take a look at the red line for a second. The whole idea with using the exhaust temperature, and I didn't really explain this well during the roast, but the exhaust temperature has a line, a continuous line going across. And the closer that the bean temperature, this rising line of the bean temperature, gets to the exhaust temperature, the lower the rate of rise is going to get. By its nature, that's kind of how it works. So you can look at the graph here and see that my rate of rise was descending, my bean temperature was rising, and that closeness, or let me go this way, that closeness between the two, between the bean temperature and the exhaust, between those two lines, the goal is to have them be really close at the end of the roast when you drop the coffee. Okay, one of the things you'll notice while I was doing this roast was I wasn't talking about rate of rise at all. I didn't reference rate of rise during the roast. Honestly, I looked at it, I think, once to kind of see where I was right when first crack started, and I was a little fast. I was a little hot. Taking a look at the exhaust temperature, you can see that instead of it being flat, I climbed. And I shouldn't have climbed. I should have backed my gas off a little bit more. So that was my mistake. If I would have had that temperature be flat, my browning phase would have been a little longer. The roast would have gone a little bit slower. But what we saw in this roast was a roast that went a little too fast, and I'm only talking a couple, 2 or 3%, which kind of equates to about 20 seconds maybe, 20 or 30 seconds at the most, difference in this roast. So I should have backed my gas off a little bit more to keep that exhaust temperature flat. If you go back and watch this video, you'll see that that arm continued to be mostly upward, and so I should have paid more attention to that. But of course, you know, here we are doing the video together, which is okay. Don't tell my family that I didn't roast the coffee perfectly for them this week. All right, so yeah, so what do we have here? We have a 49% dry phase, a 28.5% browning phase. Literally, I wanted to be at 30, and a 22% development. So if I would have been able to trade off the development between, if I would have been able to trade off the development and the browning phase by 2%, that would have been a great roast. And that equates to that, 20-second, 30-second difference during my browning phase, where I should have backed off the gas a little bit more and kept that straight line on the exhaust to continue to climb. Exhaust temperature is also really helpful because we can see the behavior of the beans when the beans are put into the roaster. We can see how that influences the air temperature. Think about it this way. You can take a look at the side of the roaster here. I've got a picture, and you'll notice I have 3 probes. The first probe at the very top is the exhaust temperature probe. That's up here. That's reading the air, the temperature of the air that's leaving the roaster. So it's going up out of the drum, up through a tube, and then exhausted out. So it's reading that temperature. That temperature is the temperature of it's the temperature of the air, and the air is being influenced by the gas, the energy that's coming from the gas. It's also being influenced from the hot drum, and it's being influenced by the cool room temperature beans that I placed in the roaster. So we can take a look at the graph and we can see this red line significantly drops. And it did that for a couple reasons. One, because I turned my gas off, just for a little bit of a soak. The other is because cooler room temperature beans were added to the drum, and that lowered the overall air temperature. That influenced the air temperature. So what we're seeing during this dry phase and during this climb, and it's really interesting, look where that red line stops climbing, pretty close to the end of dry. During that time, the air is heating up, the beans are heating up, and all of that is being displayed through the exhaust temperature. It's really interesting when you start to think of it that way. So this has been really helpful for me to kind of watch different things that are happening within the roasting environment. If I were to change my settings in Artisan to be super sensitive, or if I were to have a skinnier probe, then I would be able to see more fluctuations, more spikes in my exhaust temperature, and we would be able to see things like when the beans go exothermic. When the energy starts to release from the bean, we would start to see a spike in our exhaust temperature if we were looking at it in a close-up view. And that's really helpful. All right, and my last point is that the exhaust temperature is really just another piece of data for us. It's not the only way to roast coffee. It's not that we should ignore the rate of rise or the bean temperature, but the exhaust temperature is another piece of data to help us make the right decisions, to determine if we need to make gas adjustments, to understand what's happening to the beans while they're roasting. And even if we get better at this, and if we have more sensitive data coming in with smaller probes, even seeing events like flick and crash, we can see some of that, the precursors of that, in the exhaust temperature. So, questions to you. Have you roasted coffee using your exhaust temperature as a source or a guide to help you during your roast? Have you considered using exhaust temperature as a meter for your gas setting so that you can have your roast progress consistently each and every roast using the same exhaust temperature every time? Have you considered doing that? Have you done that? And then thirdly, have you used exhaust temperature to determine any sort of flick or crash precursors? I'm curious if any of you have been doing that. Again, if you guys have enjoyed this video, hit the like button and subscribe. That really, really helps this channel. I appreciate it. And I really would like you to share your comments. So thanks so much for joining me today, and I hope you guys have a great week roasting. We'll see you next time.